In July of 2024, I had the opportunity to take a Hyundai IONIQ 6 on a road trip from Burnaby to Dawson Creek, BC. This is a round trip of nearly 2,400 kilometers. This was a work trip attending the Summer Cruise Show and Shine car show, which we have attended for the past 3 years. As we had multiple vehicles in the show, you will also see me switch out and drive our rental Ford Lightning for part of the video. But this is mostly about the Hyundai IONIQ 6, a super aerodynamic and efficient electric sedan with impressive range and charging performance. This was an all-wheel drive long-range version with 18-inch wheels and an Enercan rated range of 509 kilometers per charge. While highway driving is less efficient than the mixed-use energy consumption ratings that get translated into advertised range, my experience with this car is that you could get over 500 kilometers per charge by cruising this highway route in eco mode, which disconnects the front motor when it isn't needed. I will also be describing the charging stations that I visited, but you'll see that this car is so efficient that I didn't stop to charge very much, even though there are plenty of stations along this route. We are also in the midst of a massive expansion of the charging station network in northern BC, so by the time that you are watching this video, there will be way more fast charging stations covering Highway 97 from Prince George up to the Yukon. The TLDR is that I left Burnaby with 100% battery charge, stopped to charge in 100 Mile House, spending 22 minutes and $23.37 in charging costs. Then it continued to Prince George without having to charge again. That could have been an even shorter stop if the stations there were higher voltage, as this car uses an 800-volt architecture and those stations are 400-volt. I did stop at an on-the-run in Williams Lake to connect to the fast chargers there to test some settings that I was playing with, but it was a very brief charge and not actually needed. I also had one experimental stop earlier in Hope where I connected for just a couple minutes while I used a washroom. It was totally unnecessary and had no impact on the trip. In Prince George, I needed to run a bunch of errands and picked up supplies, then used a more powerful charging station for 19 minutes and $19.90 in charging costs. That would be enough to get to Dawson Creek, but we made a detour into Mackenzie to try some brand new stations there. They were just opened that same week, and we wanted to try them out. I charged overnight at a colleague's house in Dawson Creek after the car show, and the return trip to Burnaby was similar, except that I needed to return the car with at least 50% battery charge, so I had a big charging session in Hope using the 350 kilowatt Electrify Canada stations, charging from 11 to 80% in 18 minutes for $40.53. Those ultra-high-powered stations are significantly more expensive. In total, I spent an hour and 40 minutes at fast chargers and $124 on charging fees for the entire round trip of nearly 2,400 kilometers. Keep in mind that the time at charging stations is usually combined with getting snacks and coffee, using the washroom, cleaning the windshield, and checking messages, so it was functionally not much different than driving a gas car in terms of time. Maybe that's all you need to know, but keep watching if you want more details and a whole bunch of POV driving footage through the Fraser Canyon and BC's central interior. I picked up this demo car in Burnaby and spent a few minutes familiarizing myself with the infotainment system. I get to drive several different EVs through my work and travel the route to Prince George a few times per year. Over the past 5 years, I have done this trip in a Volkswagen e-Golf, Chevrolet Bolt, Ford Mustang Mach-E, Tesla Model Y, Ford F-150 Lightning, and now the Hyundai IONIQ 6. The fast charging network has improved substantially each year on this route. It's at the point now that I can get into virtually any rental or demo EV and hit the road without much planning. But that said, I recommend at least taking a look at PlugShare or a better route planner, or if your vehicle has a good navigation system that can build charging plans for road trips, like Tesla for example, do a preview of the route before you head out. I didn't set up my camera for driving footage through the Fraser Valley, but it was normal weekday morning traffic without much to report, so we'll pick up the trip where I made my first stop in Hope. I have this Hyundai IONIQ 6 fully electric demo car that I picked up in Burnaby today. This is the all-wheel drive long-range version with 18-inch wheels, so it's more aerodynamic than I think there's 22-inch options available. And I picked it up in Burnaby. I'm on my way to Prince George, so it's going to be a long travel day. Dropped into Hope because I figured I'd do a nice big charging session to just kind of test its charging capabilities. But I encountered a little bit of a problem, and this was unexpected. Check this out. The car is just too efficient. It's at 78% after driving out from Burnaby to Hope. We've still got 460 kilometers left. And the average consumption is 12.7 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. Now, keep in mind, this is after driving on the highway for like an hour and a half. So it's had plenty of time to become calibrated. And I've got the AC on, 24 degrees, just keeping it nice and cozy in here. Of course, 24 degrees Celsius is usually still too hot to be comfortable. But using driver-only climate control, the cooling blows onto the driver really hard in this car, and I found that 24 degrees was plenty cool enough. It's 32 degrees outside right now, so the AC has been working. Really impressed with these numbers. I've become accustomed to driving the F-150 Lightning, which is a blast to drive, but it's not efficient. So to see these kind of numbers is really great. Now, I've still stopped in Hope because I need to resupply myself, and I decided to just drop in at these convenient on-the-run chargers. I don't really need to charge, but I may as well connect just for a few minutes while I'm inside. And then I'm going to hit the road and really just see where I need to actually stop and charge again. I'm kind of blown away. These numbers are really, really promising. Throughout the video, I'm going to keep mentioning the car's impressive range and efficiency. It's very aerodynamic, but not necessarily in a class of its own when we talk about efficiency. Drivers of Tesla Model 3s and Ys, Chevrolet Bolts, Hyundai Konas, and other smallish EVs will also see these efficiency numbers. In a market so dominated by crossover SUVs, though, it's refreshing to try a slippery sedan that makes good use of energy. I will also keep mentioning the impressive charging speeds. And yes, Tesla vehicles in particular have been hitting these speeds for years, and I've done Tesla road trips. So it's exciting to see other brands getting similar performance and also have access to high-powered charging stations on this route. We're coming into Boston Bar. It is 36 degrees out, and I've still got 399 kilometers showing on my range meter. See, there's a EV charging sign there. There's a 50 kilowatt station just off to the left coming up. One that I used many times back in the early days. The early days being about 5 years ago, using the e-Golf and then the Chevrolet Bolt. Yeah, just passing it there. Doesn't look like anyone's using it right now, but it's a good option if you're skipping some of the more southern charging stations, or skipping a charge in Cache Creek, or if you just have a shorter range EV. So far, I'm really impressed with this IONIQ 6. The efficiency is just blowing me away. Wow, it's showing 37 degrees outside now. I am using driver-only climate control and hovering around 15 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. I'm navigating to 100 Mile House, which is 240 kilometers away, so it looks like I should make it there easily. And there's on-the-run charging stations there, 150 kilowatt stations. So that's the plan, but I have a feeling I might be able to get even further. I think it just kind of depends on the climate control and how hot the weather actually gets. Oh, there we are. It's 38 degrees. Just past Lytton. So 38 degrees now. Still doing 15 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. And I've got 338 kilometers of range left. And my destination of 100 Mile House is only 194 kilometers of range. So I'll have to look at the distances. I might even be able to go a bit further than that. I just have to see if that's optimal in terms of which charging stations that I can get to. This thing is, I think, really, really fun on the highway. It's got pretty good feel to it. Definitely fun to drive. You can feel that it just like slips through the air. It just seems so effortless. So, very enjoyable highway cruiser for sure. Still showing 38 degrees outside as we come into this really low part of the canyon road. And if you're familiar with this section, there's been a lot of construction here, and it's just a notoriously twisty, sort of low-speed fun section of the highway. Be a good opportunity to gauge the wah of this Hyundai vehicle. Not going to do anything too crazy, but you can see these are 40-kilometer-an-hour corners through here. Some pretty cool, epic, dry landscape. And I'm just using iPedal through here, so no brakes so far, just the regen pedal, but like maximum regen. It is really nice and controlled. Wow, it's such a cool feel. So much control. Like once you're used to the pedal, it just makes this kind of driving sort of fun and effortless. It's now 41 degrees Celsius outside. We're just doing some adaptive cruise control along this section of highway. Still getting, my average of 15 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. This is a nifty section of highway with some fun little corners and some big views. So right now I'm still on adaptive cruise with lane keep assist. And if we get into some tighter spots where I feel like that's not comfortable, then I'll switch to, just fully manual, real human driving. But I think I'll stick with iPedal. I really like it in this car. And I really like, actually, the adaptive cruise. I find that compared to some other vehicles that I've driven, even other Hyundai vehicles, the adaptive cruise seems a bit more punchy. Like if someone merges in front of you, it'll slow down accordingly, but then it'll speed up quicker than I've noticed it doing in other vehicles. So it seems just a bit more confident and quicker to make adjustments. In terms of other electric vehicles that I've seen out on the highway today, coming the other way, a lot of Volkswagen ID4s, and seen a bunch of Ford Lightnings coming the other way, and just other Hyundai products, especially like IONIQ 5s and Hyundai Kona EVs. This section of highway does have some Tesla superchargers, so definitely, of course, I've seen Model Ys and Model 3s, plenty of those. But there are a lot of non-Tesla stations, so I feel like people who travel this area might be that much more inclined to get a non-Tesla vehicle, especially if it's just like a different shape, or based on price, because they might not get a lot of use out of the superchargers, depending on where they're going and which model of vehicle they're looking at in their price range, because there is kind of like an awkward gap in the superchargers as well between Cache Creek and Williams Lake, I believe. So I've only done that route in a Model Y long range, which was fine, but from what I understand, if you're driving a Model 3 standard range or a Model Y standard range, that area, could use some more support to make it really comfortable and seamless. But that's just based on sort of doing the math and a little bit of feedback that I've gotten from a few Tesla drivers. So we got through that fun section of highway there using just fully adaptive cruise control and lane keep assist. I'm not touching the pedals at all. So I think that this vehicle has pretty competent driver assistance. I actually, it didn't even occur to me to switch out and go manual because that felt just so natural, I suppose. Anyways, coming up onto Cache Creek in a bit, and normally on an EV road trip, I would stop in Cache Creek and charge for sure. But I still have 277 kilometers of range showing here, 51%. So I feel like this car in these conditions, could go almost 600 kilometers fully charged. So I think I can skip Cache Creek for charging, but I may stop for lunch. Okay, now here we're going to drop out of adaptive cruise, so we get the iPedal kicking in, and we can take that corner. And then we'll just pop it back into cruise. Looks like this car in front of us slowed down substantially. That may have been a bit of a wake-up call, that corner, because you really can sort of zone out and pick up speed on this section, and then wham, you're into these really tight corners. I've always loved these big views. I don't know if the angle is really catching it on the cell phone, but just these remarkable big vistas going through this area. Really, really neat landscape. Okay, now let's get it into sport mode and punch up past these slower vehicles. I just love one pedal driving with these electric cars. You just have so much control over your speed, especially in cornering situations like this where you're doing quite a spirited pass and then you're coming into kind of a tight corner, and it's just so easy to modulate your speed and get it just right. Now that traffic's behind us, we can just pull in and resume cruise control, maybe even take it down a notch. Don't need to be in sport mode anymore and go back to eco. Now, my understanding with this vehicle is it is all-wheel drive, motor in the front and motor in the back. But if you put it in eco, once you're like out on the highway, I don't know kind of where the threshold is, but it will disengage the front motor and just become a rear-wheel drive vehicle with a little bit of extra weight in the front. And in that way, it just reduces some of the energy that you're using to simply cruise along. With that section done, we'll check in if there's any stops to be made in Cache Creek. I hear there's a place with amazing tacos in Cache Creek, so I may stop for lunch if they're open. Desert Hills Taco Stand in Cache Creek is a gem. I regret not getting more footage. It's great, and you should definitely add it to your bucket list. And with that done, on my way, continuing north, heading towards 100 Mile House. And keep in mind, I still haven't charged. We're at 43%, showing 217 kilometers of range. It is still 39 degrees outside, still keeping my same climate control settings. So hopefully as the weather cools down a bit, assuming that it does as we get on in the evening, just as it's almost 4 o'clock now, hopefully the car is a bit more efficient, or my travels are a bit more efficient, as the car doesn't have to work against like 20 degrees of cooling to keep me comfortable. You can see the active cooling flaps open on the front of the car to help in this hot weather. I stopped to charge at the on-the-run station in 100 Mile House. This is a 150 kilowatt station and the car can charge well over 200 kilowatts, so I was surprised to see it only pulling 104 kilowatts. I have used this station with other vehicles and got higher charging speeds, so I had some theories regarding the hot weather and the battery not being preconditioned, assuming that I was possibly missing a cooling benefit from preconditioning. So I fiddled with the settings, made sure preconditioning was enabled, and did some forum sleuthing. It wasn't clear if battery preconditioning would do extra cooling or if the hot weather was even an issue, but I did discover that these cars won't trigger battery preconditioning if they are in eco mode, nor will they precondition the battery if it is below 20%. But it turns out the suboptimal charging speed has nothing to do with heat or preconditioning, but that these on-the-run charging stations are on a 400-volt architecture, whereas the IONIQ 5 and 6 use an 800-volt architecture. So if you are driving one of these new Hyundais, you will not get over 104 to 105 kilowatts at these stations. There's nothing wrong with the car or the stations, they just aren't a perfect match. Still, 100 kilowatts isn't too bad on this car since it is so efficient and since it will maintain that charging speed right up to 80%. I want to leave this portion of the journey with some explanation of how I am choosing which charging stations to use, because there are a lot of options on this route. If you're used to EV road trips, this is going to be very basic, so I won't be offended if you skip ahead. I am choosing stations optimized for time, so I'm skipping some free, lower-powered fast chargers and opting for higher-powered stations with a fee. This means that I'm using the PlugShare app to find stations with the highest output, measured in kilowatts. Previously, my quickest EV trip on this route was with a Tesla Model Y long range. In that case, I just put my destination into the navigation system and let the car build a route using Tesla supercharger stations. On that trip, I used superchargers in Cache Creek and Williams Lake. Superchargers can give you up to 240 kilowatts peak power, which is still considered to be quite fast, even though Tesla has been doing so for a long time now. Some other vehicles have recently been given access to the supercharger network using adapters, but that's not the case for the Hyundai that I'm driving. So the highest output non-Tesla option was the on-the-run stations, and they can deliver up to 150 kilowatts, though as you saw, they are not a perfect match for this charging architecture and max out at 104 kilowatts for this vehicle. While those charging stations aren't optimized for this vehicle, they're very conveniently located, and the car is so efficient that I still only needed to make one stop. On the return trip, you will see the car get up to 230 kilowatts on a much higher powered station, but not all EVs charge that fast. It's important for EV drivers to know what their vehicle's charging capabilities are and find appropriate charging stations so that you don't waste time and money. You can connect an EV with a great charging speed to a lower powered station and it won't do any damage, but you won't be taking advantage of that car's capabilities. Meanwhile, you can connect a slower charging vehicle to a high-powered station, and again, it won't do any damage, but you might be wasting money because high-powered stations tend to cost more. This route has plenty of fast charging stations. You can check it out on PlugShare and plan accordingly. Sometimes you aren't optimizing your stations for time savings, but based around convenience, if you're stopping to eat, take bathroom breaks, etc. There are plenty of options, so again, check for stations on PlugShare. I got into Prince George with a healthy amount of range left. I was staying overnight with friends and could have plugged in at their house for some level 1 charging, but opted not to since I wanted to simulate a road trip for those using hotels or even driving straight through. If you are staying at a hotel on your EV trip, try to find one with level 2 charging stations that you can use overnight. You can use PlugShare and filter for level 2 stations to find options. Charging stations are also a searchable amenity on vacation rental platforms. You might also be able to use outlets at hotels, vacation rentals, or even campsites, but check with the operator before you plug in. With all that out of the way, let's move on to the rest of the trip. I pulled into my destination in Prince George last night with 18% left and 78 kilometers remaining. So plenty of buffer. Now it's just afternoon here, and we're already at 28 degrees. I am going to go charge up. I realized that there are some 200 kilowatt ChargePoint chargers near some shopping. So I am going to go test those out and see how this performs on some different charging stations. This is a 200 kilowatt charger, and we're hitting 180. So this is going to be a very fast charging session. I am just going to go grab some supplies that I need for traveling around this week. This is technically hosted on a Ford dealership, but it's right near a shopping area along the highway in Prince George. Really great option to have these new 200 kilowatt chargers here. This isn't the maximum that the vehicle will charge at, but it's pretty good. We'll see how long this actually takes. It says 52 minutes remaining there. That would be to 100%, which is ridiculous on a fast charging station. I want to get more up around 80%. Great asset having these 200 kilowatt charging stations here, and these are going to be the fastest that I'll use on this trip. So on the return, which I plan on doing in one day, Dawson Creek back to Burnaby, these are going to be crucial. So we should be here for just like a couple more minutes, maybe 4 or 5 more minutes, and then we're good to go. And this is a big charging site. We've got 3 stations, 3 level 2 stations, each with 2 plugs. And then we've got 3 DCFC fast charging stations. Looks like we've got a total of 3 CCS plugs and 1 CHAdeMO plug down there. So thank you, Ford, for helping to charge up our Hyundai. I ran some errands in Prince George and took the opportunity to grab photos. I also needed to take meetings and get work done, so I stayed another night before going to Dawson Creek. You saw me use the ChargePoint station at the Ford dealership, which can be activated with the ChargePoint app. The on-the-run stations have credit card readers as an alternative to the Journey app that activates them, but make sure that you have the ChargePoint app or RFID card if you want to use that ChargePoint station. The next morning, I met with my colleagues at their hotel. They brought up a Ford F-150 Lightning and stayed at a hotel with level 2 charging, so the truck was fully charged and ready to travel to Dawson Creek, and the car was around 80% from the fast charger, which is what I would do on a straight-through road trip or staying at a hotel without overnight charging. We've refilled coffee at Zoe's Cafe in downtown Prince George, and we're heading out this morning with 80% charge, showing 427 kilometers of range. And this car could easily drive to Dawson Creek on a single charge if I had have charged up overnight. But I didn't, because I know that we're making some other stops along the way. We're going to just hit up a little cafe in Macleod Lake, get some photos at the charging stations there, and then we're also going to stop at some brand new charging stations in Mackenzie, and we'll be meeting up with other staff who are driving the Ford F-150 Lightning. Sakene Food and Fuel in Macleod Lake. So we rolled in here at 54% and 291 kilometers remaining. Look at that efficiency. 14.4 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. Highway driving, AC on. It's not that warm today. It's 21 degrees, 2 passengers and luggage. So we don't really need to stop and charge here, but we do need to get Bannock. And look at this. We've got another Hyundai product here, IONIQ 5, charging up. I think they are probably heading up to the show in Dawson Creek as well. So let's just connect to the chargers for fun while we go into the cafe and get a bite to eat. We pulled in with just this Hyundai car here, the IONIQ 5, and shortly after, our other staff member came in with the Ford Lightning, and then we also have a Subaru Solterra. So everyone's had a chance to get acquainted. All these vehicles are going up to Dawson Creek, and no one really needs to stop and charge here. I think everyone just dropped in to check it out and hit up the cafe, and is very fortunate that we all got to meet. But really we'll go up to Mackenzie for those who need to fast charge, because there are brand new 180 kilowatt stations there, whereas these older stations are just 25 kilowatt. So let's check in when we get to Mackenzie. Going to Mackenzie is a 30-kilometer detour from the highway, or 60-kilometer round trip. If we didn't make this detour, the Hyundai probably could have driven straight to Dawson Creek without charging. But this is a brand new charging site, and we want to check it out and make sure it's working. Plus, the standard range Ford Lightning needs a charging stop on this leg of the trip, and these new stations are so much more powerful than the ones in Macleod Lake that the detour still makes sense. Later this summer, there will be more charging options along the Highway 97 route at Bear Lake, Powder King, and Chetwynd, so you'll have lots of options and won't have to branch off into Mackenzie. These are the new stations in Mackenzie. We just pulled in and started to charge up. Let's see what we get for power levels. We're not terribly depleted, 47%. Coming in at 59, jumping up to 100 kilowatts. And these are 180 kilowatt stations. There we go, 132. Let's see what it gets up to here. Okay, holding in at 132. Oh, there we go, 180. Okay, so we're maxing this right out. Good job. IONIQ 6. We're going to get the Lightning powered up.
Figure out how it's going to fit with the cord.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Now, see, we've got these enormous parking spots here so that you can have pull through EV traffic with trailers and large vehicles, maybe even, electric delivery trucks and whatnot. We can share power off of this one station. We can do 2 vehicles at a time and it'll split power. Let's see what happens. Here we go. So 2 vehicles at the same time. We have the Lightning right now pulling in, oh, there we go, 89. So it looks like it should be split perfectly. And 89 for the IONIQ 6. Yep, so perfect split of power. And even though the cabling is kind of awkward with vehicles with ports on different sides, there's enough space that you can sort of make it work here. Anyways, we'll hang out here and then just head on to Dawson Creek. We're doing a driver swap now. The rest of the crew is taking the Hyundai, and I am going to be driving the Ford Lightning. So we are standing around talking to people who want to know about the charging stations. We're up to 90% here. This truck is a bit of a hog with electricity, so I'm going to have to watch my range. But time to leave Mackenzie. We're going to head over to Dawson Creek. You didn't see it in the video, but we used the BC Hydro EV app to activate the station in Mackenzie. BC Hydro stations can be activated with the BC Hydro EV app or RFID card, or alternatively a Flow or Charge Hub account. If you have any trouble with those, you can call the number posted on the charging station to get help or have it started remotely. If you can see the speedo in the camera view, you'll notice I just have the cruise set to the speed limit. I'm really trying to stretch out the efficiency of the vehicle, getting from Mackenzie to Dawson Creek, because this is the standard range Lightning, and there's no really good charging options. There's some, but they're not great. I'd rather just not have to stop and charge. Anyways, right now my efficiency or fuel consumption is 25 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. And I've targeted that if I can stay at 30 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers or below, that I'll roll in still with enough range to drive around and do some errands. So this is great. We do have some climbing to do still, but just doing the speed limit and it being a day where I don't have to use a lot of climate control does make a difference compared to last year, because last year it was a much hotter day, and we're using more climate control. So I'll try and get some scenery shots along the way to include in the video, and otherwise we are going to check in with the rest of the team at the East Pine rest area, regardless of whether or not we need to charge. We're going to stop in there. We're going to check on the charging stations, because I've seen on PlugShare people have been having mixed results with them, and sometimes on those older Delta 25 kilowatt stations, the user can just reset the stations quite easily. But in order to even know that you can do that, you have to go on PlugShare and read some descriptions that the ministry that manages those has entered in the PlugShare description. So anyways, we'll just stop in there, check out those stations, regardless of whether or not I need to charge. The Hyundai will not need to charge at all. It's a efficiency and range monster. It can probably go the rest of the weekend without needing to charge. We're heading through Chetwynd now, and the strategy of just using cruise control, sticking to the speed limit, is working out really great. We have 167 kilometers of range still left. That should put us into Dawson Creek with about 60 kilometers of range left over. So that's much better than last year when we rolled in with like 15 kilometers of range left. So it's not too far now until we get to the East Pine rest area. And I'll be stopping in there next to check in with the rest of our crew and see how those charging stations are functioning, but I won't need to actually charge up there. I'm at East Pine rest area and I have 125 kilometers of range left. It's about 70 kilometers into town, I believe, so I don't really need to use these charging stations. I will give them a quick check and then be on my way. We held in at 24 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, so that's great. I was supposed to meet my coworkers here, but they're nowhere to be found, so I assumed they just skipped this and went on into town, so I better move quickly and catch up to them. We have both vehicles now at the rest area, and we're just checking out the charging stations. So we have the Flow Level 2 charging station. No activation needed, no card, no app. You just plug it in. All of these are plug and play. And on our vehicles using the CCS cables, they all work. So we don't actually need to charge here. Just wanted to check it out, update PlugShare that everything is working, and we will be on our way now. In Dawson Creek, we had a bunch of tasks to do in preparation for the next day's show and shine, like washing the vehicles, preparing our display, and meeting with volunteers. After all that, we put the Ford Lightning on a level 2 charging station near our hotel and went for dinner at a cool little tap house downtown. The show and shine is always a great time. I was doing test drives with the Ford Lightning and neglected to take a lot of videos. In retrospect, I should have captured some conversations with the other EV drivers, as we had a mix of new and experienced EV road trippers. Regardless, we had a lot of great conversations with attendees who had tons of great questions about going electric. This was our largest EV section of the show to date, with a Rivian R1T, 2 Hyundai IONIQ 5s, 1 IONIQ 6, a Subaru Solterra, and the Ford Lightning. We also did a vehicle-to-vehicle charging demonstration using the Ford F-150 Lightning. Let's explore how we're going to charge one of these other vehicles using the Ford Lightning, and doing this at 30 amps. So we've got our Ford portable charging station. We've got the 30 amp RV plug connected into the station, and then I have this little adapter so that we can plug it into the 30 amp plug in the bed. So we've got all that plugged in. Next, we're just going to plug in the Subaru. Okay, so what we're trying to achieve here is level 2 charging off of the Lightning.
There's the click.
There we go. And now I'm going to head into the truck and show you what to do in the menus. So when you're in the Ford menu, you want to get into Features, then go into Pro Power on board. And from here you can toggle the outlets in the bed on. So we'll just hit that to toggle them on. We acknowledge that. And it takes a few seconds, but we should see power now going out through here on this display. There we go. The charging station has to start up. It takes a few seconds, and then we'll see this ramp up and put out full power here shortly. There we go. The other important thing that you want to do is come down here and select what's your threshold for when that will turn off so that you still have some range left. We're going to be doing test drives today, so I've put it at 200 kilometers. I don't want to go below 200 kilometers. So it's a really simple process for getting someone charging level 2 off of the Ford Lightning. We're starting our day after the car show in Dawson Creek at 100% charge, 588 kilometers in eco mode. That should be enough to get us to Prince George, where we'll do a charge at those newer ChargePoint stations. And I've reset the trip information so that we can get a fresh reading on our efficiency. Gonna get packed up, hit the road. Some of the crew might stop in Mackenzie, but this car definitely doesn't have to. It can go straight on to Prince George. We stopped at the mile zero marker to grab a few photos, and at the time, the new BC Hydro charging site was still under construction. This is one of 2 new sites coming to Dawson Creek this year. After meeting with some colleagues at Peace Energy Co-op, it was time to get on the road back to Prince George. There goes the IONIQ 6 with our other crew heading out to Prince George. I'm going to switch into the truck to drive down, and I am going to be making a stop in Mackenzie, I imagine. The IONIQ 6 will go straight through, but we're at 100% and showing 374 kilometers of range. So, yeah, this truck will need a little charging stop. I'll drop in at Mackenzie. I am shortly out of Dawson Creek, and if you're able to see my efficiency on the gauge here, it's 41 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. So that is pretty bad. I am driving into what seems to be kind of a strong wind, and this is just really something that you have to watch out for in a vehicle that's not designed to be aerodynamic, like a truck. The effects of wind resistance increase exponentially. So in the crew with the Hyundai probably won't notice it too much driving into the wind, but a truck-shaped vehicle is definitely going to notice that. Anyways, it's a good thing that the Mackenzie charging stations are there. I'll definitely need to stop if these kind of numbers keep up. I mean, I'd have to stop anyways with the standard range Lightning, but I'm going to use a bit more energy than I would have expected if we're doing the numbers that I was coming into town, which was about 24 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. But I'm also going to keep in mind that I'm going to be going downhill instead of climbing up into the mountains. I'll be going down through the mountains. So maybe I'll get back to the sort of mid-20s later on in the trip. I'm about 50 kilometers outside of Dawson Creek now, and we've got our fuel consumption or energy consumption down to 33 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. The wind is still coming on fairly strong. I don't know if you can really catch it on the trees. See how strong that wind is, but you definitely feel it. Good to know, though, that I guess getting the truck up to speed took a lot of energy, but now that we're cruising, it's becoming a bit more efficient. And then I hope that once I get into the mountains, then the wind won't be such a big deal. I'm just outside of Chetwynd now, and we're down to 30 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. So our efficiency is getting better, and this is getting more into my target range. But with this wind, even starting out with 100%, things are going to be close when I get into Mackenzie, because it is about 200 kilometers away, and I have 230 kilometers of range showing on my gauge. I suspect I'll be able to build in a bit more of a buffer as we start heading downhill more consistently now, and hopefully get some protection from the wind. And I think the speed limit drops coming up as well. There's a portion of this that's 90 kilometers an hour instead of 100 kilometers an hour. We've got some trailer traffic, so I just might not be going as fast, and that will kind of work in the truck's favor in terms of efficiency. Regardless, we can totally make it to Mackenzie. It'll be interesting to see how the efficiency plays out and what we've got on the gauge when we finally roll in.
Take the next right onto British Columbia 39 North. Continue on British Columbia 39 North for 29 kilometers.
Here we are at Mackenzie. Just plugged in, pulling 130 kilowatts right now. That's pretty decent. I know this version of the Ford Lightning will not go up to 180, but with speeds like that, we'll just be here for maybe 15 minutes or so that we can charge up, head down to Prince George. Charged up to 72% in Mackenzie, and it's time to hit the road, get on down to Prince George. And when I get to Prince George, I'm going to swap out and pick up the Hyundai, and then we will head down to Vancouver, or Burnaby, I should say, in the IONIQ 6. Every time we do this trip, we just barely miss the worst of forest fire season. By the next week, highway closures due to forest fires started to pop up. Regardless of whether you drive an electric vehicle or not, please check your route on Drive BC and pay attention to emergency signage. I'll be getting to Prince George in about 20 minutes when I start to enter town, then I have to drive across town to exchange vehicles. But driving in from Mackenzie, we're doing 26 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, so much better efficiency. It's still windy out, but traffic has been kind of congested. There's not a lot of passing on this highway, and I've been behind some logging trucks, and it looks like a maybe load of gravel here, something like that, in front of me. So we've just been flipped along at the speed limit. Maybe getting a little bit of aerodynamic help from the vehicles in front, though I think we've got more of a crosswind here. Anyways, I think our other staff are already in Prince George and charging the IONIQ 6 so that we'll be able to swap over. They are staying the night, but I'll be taking the IONIQ 6 on to Vancouver today because I have to return it to Burnaby in the morning. I'm back at these ChargePoint fast chargers, 200 kilowatt stations at the Prince George Ford dealership in the used lot. Got the Lightning this time. See what we're dropping in at here. Okay, yeah. Pulling a pretty good rate right away. Good rate for this truck. And I came in around 25%. So I'm just going to charge this up for a little while before I swap it out and get onto the IONIQ. I'm back at the Best Western in Prince George. Swapped out the truck, so now our other staff are going to take this truck to Vancouver tomorrow. It's plugged in there on the one charging station here at the hotel. And I've got the Hyundai lined up. Time to get in and go. Actually, no, I can't go right away. I have to take it through a car wash because I'm probably going to do some photo and video. And I think it still needs to be charged up after arriving in town. Let's see what we've got here. Oh yeah, 30%. So I'm going to head back to that Ford dealership because it's near the car wash that I want to use anyways. Look at that, 30%, 160 kilometers still. Pretty good, but I want to get it charged up on those 200 kilowatt chargers because they're super fast with this car. And away we go. Here we go on the 200 kilowatt charging stations with the IONIQ 6. It's at 30%. Let's see what it ramps up to. It wasn't preconditioned on the short drive over here, but it is 32 degrees Celsius outside. And I drove it over in sport mode, so hopefully the battery is nice and toasty. We are, looks like we're going to max this one out. Maybe 180. Okay, it might ramp all the way up to 200. So that's going to charge really fast. I'm just going to pack up the car, get ready for my trip south, and should only be charging here for, I'm thinking maybe 10 minutes, then I can go. While this is charging up, I'm packing up the car, and I just wanted to talk about this little storage area right here, which I find super useful for storing water on this long trip in hot weather. Like, it's really hot out, and I'm going through a lot of water. And I just found that it's cool that I can fit this whole water bottle down there, or water jug down there. And there's a non-slip pad there, so it won't slide back and forth. And I just thought it was cool that it kind of snugs in there so it won't roll around or slide around at all. And then I can still stuff some snacks down in that little space too. I can see how, if you're not diligent, that could be cluttered up with all sorts of things that you just drop in there and never sort out. But for me on this trip, I really like that I can just pack that water jug in there and it's not sloshing around, it's not rolling around in the back or falling off the seats or anything like that. How are we doing here for charge? So it'd be 11 minutes to get up to 80%. I don't know if I'll really go that high. We'll just see how, I was just trying to do the math quickly, but we'll just see how it tapers off as we get up near 80%. But the car's pulling 190 kilowatts, not preconditioned, just in hot weather. So that's pretty cool. I'm happy with that. I'm in the car wash now. Just finished up that charging session to 77%. Went to the car wash nearby. I was going to go to 80% because it would still be the most efficient charging. But I think the payment or the prepaid amount in my ChargePoint account ran out. But anyways, instead of standing around reloading that, I just decided to hit the road. Showing 386 kilometers here. Which mode are we in? There we go, 397. So I'm going to go down to probably 100 Mile House. Should be able to make it. And hit the on-the-run charging there as soon as this car wash session wraps up. At the start of my travel day, I didn't leave Dawson Creek until 11:30 a.m. Then, when I got to Prince George, I had to charge the truck, meet with other staff at their hotel, talk for a while, exchange vehicles, switch luggage over, have a quick snack, charge the IONIQ 6, hit the car wash, and didn't end up leaving PG until about 7 p.m. I also stopped to take extra photos and videos south of Quesnel, which ate up time as well. So you'll see that it's late in the day by the time I get to Williams Lake. There aren't any hidden charging stops, just a few hours of extra errands. On a normal road trip, I would only be stopping in Prince George to charge for about 15 minutes. You'll notice it's much later in the day now. I've been stopping to do photos and videos, but I haven't charged yet. And I decided to stop for a charge in Williams Lake. I could have continued on to 100 Mile House, have plenty remaining. I think I had about 180 kilometers remaining when I got to Williams Lake, so definitely could have made it to 100 Mile House. But the human needed to stop, had to get coffee and some snacks and clean bugs off of the windshield. So these stations aren't as powerful as the 200 kilowatt ChargePoint ones that I used in Prince George. But getting 104 kilowatts off of these is serviceable, especially with a vehicle that is so efficient. So I can really stretch out the power that I have. Once I charge here, I'll easily be able to continue on to Hope. Yeah, we're still getting 104 kilowatts. And then once I'm in Hope, I'll be able to use the really powerful Electrify Canada stations and hopefully put this thing through its paces to see what we can really get up to for charging speeds. We've got someone from the car show over there heading home as well. And I ended up talking to people here at the station who wandered over and wanted to know what's going on. So I ended up hanging around until 82%. Got 456 kilometers of range. Let's head on down to Hope. Should be an easy drive down through the Fraser Canyon, get to Hope, and try Electrify Canada stations there. I'm just leaving Spence's Bridge now. It's 2:15 in the morning. It's 26 degrees Celsius out. So I haven't been looking at the weather along the route, but I imagine it was a very hot day. We've got 39% at Spence's Bridge, and that comes out to 225 kilometers of range remaining, and I just have 143 kilometers to go before I reach Hope. Coming into this construction site now in the Fraser Canyon, aside from it being ridiculously hot, the air is also getting quite smoky. So I'm still going through tons of water. Okay, looks like we have to stop here for a bit. Then we'll head on through the twisty little section of the canyon and just make our way past Boston Bar. Do the rest of the canyon. It's always kind of slow going, but obviously there's not a whole lot of traffic right now. Getting closer to Hope. About an hour and a half out. Well, here we are in Hope at Electrify Canada. We came in with 11%, and that translates to 55 kilometers remaining of range. Now remember, we left Williams Lake with 82%. So really pleased with the performance of this and its efficiency. It seems like the first part of that drive coming through from Williams Lake was a bit more energy intensive than the last bit, say after 70 Mile. Once I got going downhill after 70 Mile, then gained back quite a lot of range. Anyways, let's plug into Electrify Canada at the 350 kilowatt charging station and see what we can hit for our peak charging rate. We're pushing 225. See if we'll get over that crest. But that ramped up right away, getting up over 220. So that's pretty cool to see on this car. First time I've seen it since this is the highest power station that I've used. And so that would be 19 minutes up to 80%. The screen on the charging station won't turn on, but here we are pushing 230 kilowatts. So good to see that these stations are working well, even though that screen won't turn on the other side. But yeah, this is no preconditioning on the car, just a very warm evening and, full day of driving. So I suppose the battery's still pretty warm anyways. Oh, see, we're getting just over 230, 231. We're coming to the end of our charging session, and I just want to point out, this is still well over 100 kilowatts, right up to 80%, and it should drop off now that it hit 80. in short order. It should be going down because on the other chargers it falls down to about 90 kilowatts, somewhere after 80%. But yeah, I am loving this charging speed. But 80% is good enough, so it's time to take off. It's time to return this car back to Burnaby. I want to point out that the last charging session I did at Electrify Canada went from 11% to 80% in 18 minutes, right on. That, I believe, is the advertised charging performance if you're using a 350 kilowatt charging station. So I'm very impressed with the charging of the vehicle, really impressed with its efficiency and its range, and the style has really grown on me. I was also impressed with the charging stations along this trip through Dawson Creek. Everything worked and was easy to activate. So it was all quite seamless. I think a really successful trip overall. Really glad I had the opportunity to take this vehicle out. I hope you found it helpful, and I hope you learned a few things. And now, as sun rises in the Fraser Valley here, it's time to get on the road. I hope you learned a few things about the Hyundai IONIQ 6, the Ford Lightning, and using charging stations in BC. And I hope you at least enjoyed the scenery from this trip spanning a few thousand kilometers. There are plenty of videos out there reviewing these vehicles with perspectives from all over the world. But I put this together so that you can see what it's like driving EVs and using charging stations in BC on this road trip that I do at least once a year. You can find out more about driving electric in BC at emotivebc.ca.